After it was blocked by two different federal appeals courts, President Trump's travel ban just got a partial victory from the Supreme Court today. The High Court saying it will take up the case this October and decide whether the ban is legal. But in the meantime, the justices overturned some parts of the ban that were blocked by lower courts. Earlier today, I spoke with the Washington Post Supreme Court reporter Robert Barnes, and he explained what happened.
The Supreme Court said that they will hear the merits of this case in the fall, but in the meantime, they said that a limited version of Donald Trump's travel ban could go into effect. They carved out a section and said that people who have relatives in the United States that they're coming to visit, or if they've been admitted to a university here, or had a speaking engagement, or perhaps a job waiting, that they were still eligible to get the visas and come to the United States. But those who didn't have a connection to the U.S. would have to abide by this ban.
Should we take from this injunction that the court seems willing to side with the White House once they finally hear the full case in October?
I think it's a little hard to read that. Three of the justices said that they would have allowed the ban to go into effect as the president wrote it, and that the president has great authority in this area of immigration and national security. But there were, as I say, there were only three who said that. I think that everyone agrees that the president has a lot of authority here, but the question for the court is sort of how far is too far in this.
And we're going to hear more from Robert Barnes in a few minutes about some of the other Supreme Court rulings that came down today, and also how the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy might change the balance of power on the court. But for now, we're going to look at the politics of this, particularly on the travel ban itself. And guys, I think that the court's probably going to uphold most of the travel ban as we move towards October. But, you know, one thought that I had, the ruling today basically says that people who have a reason to be here, have a business being in the country, whether it's a job or school or speaking engagements, they can come. It's the people who are just coming here on vacation or coming here really for no reason who can be impacted by the ban. That means we're not going to see the same scenes at airports that we saw in January. We won't see the same throngs of people, lawyers working to do what they can. Dominic, I have a feeling that, you know, you combine the lack of visuals with the Supreme Court seeming to side with the Trump administration, that's going to move the needle even more towards the Trump side of this, at least in the court of public opinion.
I concur. When you have a lack of visuals, that often can shape the argument because the American people can't see for themselves. So, for example, during the Iraqi war, when the Bush administration stopped letting the cameras, still photography, I believe, and video camera, record the bodies when they were coming home from war. Mm-hmm. And so visuals play a large role on almost any issue, certainly on something as contentious as this one. Let's look at the court, and basically Trump's got the votes anyway. At least a 5-4 majority.
Assuming
I mean, the
Kennedy.
professor, right? Okay, so I'm making a large assumption there, but basically he's got the votes to begin with. I agree with your assessment that this, by almost every indicator, and you never know with the Supreme Court, but it's looking like he's got enough support to get this done. But the other side can point to the fact that it was a partial victory for the president. It wasn't a full victory. And they could also point to the fact that the White House wanted an expedited hearing on this, which it did not get, almost an emergency hearing. The Supreme Court said, hey, we'll put this off until the next session.
So, Jeanne, we're going to have fewer visuals of this at airports. And then I want to show you some numbers from some recent polling on this. The differences in how Republicans and Democrats look at the travel ban. 87% say of Republicans say it's to protect the country. 34% say prevent Muslims from entering the country. It's not, you know, these numbers don't have to add up to 100%. Democrats, it's reversed, but still 41% say it's to protect the country as opposed to just overtly banning Muslims from entering the country. I'm not sure there's a lot of good news in these numbers for Democrats or for people who want to overturn the travel ban. You know, people can just claim, hey, we got to keep America safe. That's an argument that cuts through a lot of different politics.
It does, and especially as we look at the incidents that occurred over in London alone in the last month or so. So that absolutely resonates with a lot of Americans. And when we looked at the exit polls in the 2016 race, security was a huge, huge issue. But if we just go back to the court for a minute, they did what they famously always do, which is they tried to play both ends against the middle. This is a mixed ruling, so it allows Donald Trump to go out as he did today and say, you know what, I won here. And it allows the opponents to go out and say, we won here, when in fact you have a mixed ruling, which is going to allow certain people from these 6 banned, quote unquote, banned countries to come in, and it's going to force others to stay out. And so I don't know that we learned much today, although when you look at the full ruling, you can see that you've got 3 seemingly solidly on the side of the president, and it's really going to depend on these 2 in the middle. And as you mentioned, the fate of Justice Kennedy, I mean, he usually determines almost single-handedly what happens, is a huge question mark here as we get to next term.
This is a president who's been starved for victories that he can tout. Is this one, and if so, does this help him in other areas?
He's going to tout it whether it's a real victory or not.
Well,
so I think we can all agree, and Dominic knows him better than any of us, but he's going to tout it as a victory. But, you know, he has also really gotten on the wrong side of the courts here in many instances. And so I think he has to be very pleased with the lawyers who argued this case on his behalf, that he came out with even a partial victory on this case. You know, the law, I think, was on his side had he not gone out and tweeted and made the statements he did. Presidents have wide-ranging authority here, but he kept shooting his own lawyers in the foot, so to speak, by saying this was a Muslim ban. So I think he's got to be very pleased, despite all his efforts, they were able to come through at least halfway.
Here's why it's a victory for Trump, even though, as the professor articulated, it's a mixed result. It's a victory because just imagine if the Supreme Court had ruled against this ban. He's already, some will argue, based on his poll numbers, on political life support. Imagine what would have happened if he would have lost today. And so I also want to say I never thought that I would agree with Justice Thomas on anything. I never saw the day. I never thought it would come. But he did make a very legitimate argument in arguing with the 3 that how are you going to enforce this? That it may open up more questions than terms of answers, because what stands to mind to me, you know, you got to know someone in the country or delivering a speech or being a college student. Can't almost anyone point to a relationship somewhere with someone in the United States?
I think you might have just developed a business opportunity there.
Okay.
Let me be your contact in the United States. Final question. I understand why ban supporters might be motivated to vote on the ban. Hey, I'm pro-America, I'm pro-safety, that sort of thing. For the people who are opposed to the travel ban, is this a voting issue? Will this actually, or were the people who would vote on this issue already predisposed to vote against Trump, to vote against Republicans in general?
I don't think we're going to see this as a voting issue. I really don't. And again, it depends on what happens in next term, which we probably won't know till shortly before the November 18 elections. But, you know, so could it? Yes. But the Supreme Court traditionally isn't a big motivator for people in terms of voting.
The voting issue is the president himself.
Right. And whether that raises his level of support and enables him to do other things. All right, there is much more on the Supreme Court, and there were many more decisions today, including a couple on gay rights that just came down. We'll analyze those right after this.